This is a really special night for Vanderbilt and I think for Nashville in terms of what we are doing to what I would say to continue to write a narrative, a story, an account of this great university, always looking forward and thinking of, despite whatever challenges we think of today, that bright, optimistic view on our future and what is possible and what might be possible in our university, but certainly in our nation. One thing that I am always interested in is the history of the institution at which I work, the history of our city, the history of our nation. And often we try to represent that history. You know, Vanderbilt will give an account of history. Sometimes we may even authorize a history. But another way that we try to provide an account to position figures in a narrative is through the addition of portraits to the university. And anybody who walks around a great institution will always be struck at the portraits. Who is that person? What did they do? What was their role? Why is their portrait up? Earning one spot there is unusual, demanding, challenging. But the selection of those who are portrayed on the campus is one of the most important things that we do. Tonight we're here to unveil the portrait of my good friend, my colleague on the faculty, my distinguished alumnus, I will say my mentor, my celebrant, co-celebrant at points of enthusiasm, James Lawson. James' history at Vanderbilt is a long one, and we stand in the Divinity School where we have a plaque for Chancellor Branscombe, who was the chancellor when Jim was here. We are now adding to the history of the institution while Jim is here as one of our colleagues. We thought long and hard about doing a portrait and who should be the person who would paint that portrait, and how would that happen? You know, how would we talk to Jim and Dorothy about this portrait? I want to recognize my good brother, friend from Mississippi, Lou Outlaw, because through all of Jim's odyssey back with Dorothy, Lou has been a pivotal figure. And when we sat down to think of how do we participate in writing the history and creating that diversity that people see in providing an account of this institution, Lou and I talked a lot about this, and we said this is a very special occasion. This is something extraordinary. And I said, Lou, give some real thought to how we go about doing this and then celebrating this. And I said, find a fitting portrait artist as well. Let's try to create the history and make the history and move forward with a compelling account. And so Lou came to me and he said, you know, I have a really great idea. And I said, well, what's that? And he said, the first African-American artist to paint a portrait of a president was Simi Knox. Why don't we engage him to do the portrait of the Reverend Lawson? And I said, I can't think of something that would give me more pleasure than to try to weave our fabric and the story of the portrait and the history of our university and the process of change at Vanderbilt and change in the nation with this prominent artist. So we went, and after that it kind of followed wonderfully, like, well, I'm going to meet with my team and talk to Reverend Lawson, and I think what he has come up with can never capture the depth and true beauty and peace that Jim represents and conveys to all of us every day in his work and in his deeds and in his teaching. But it is a beautiful, beautiful painting of a beautiful, beautiful person who has been such an important part of our university. So I would ask Dorothy and Jim to come up here. And Lou, why don't you join us, unless you're in photo op? Come on, you guys help me take this.
What if you do on this side?
Do we do it from the bottom, Lou? Is it?
Thank you so much.
Much for all you've done.
Thank you.
For a blessing. Thank you, brother. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for being here, and Chancellor Zeppos and sisters and brothers. I'm just very pleased to be here on this occasion and to see this moment. I don't know how I'll translate or understand this down the road, but I'll enjoy it while it's going on. I do not know the precise moment when the occasion, when this occasion began its journey. But in 2005, when the Lawsons were brought into the process, we found the trustees and chancellor's offices and provost offices greatly engaged. They shared with us their human affections, which is an early 18th century phrase meaning the best of humanity. They, with zeal, promoted the emerging new Vanderbilt and described the 21st century vision, and that introduction compelled Dorothy and compelled me towards this evening. So this evening has been a long journey. I'm delighted that it's here in Benton Chapel because I was the first generation of divinity school people who were in this chapel. We, in this quadrangle, we watched it rising from the earth in 1958, 59, and then we moved into it in 59 and began to give it feeling and body and the rest of it. Let me just simply say that this unveiling and this chosen space, this 50th year, converge for me into a fiercely urgent, now permeated by the pathos and wisdom and grace of the past. It comes together. So with many gratitudes, I acknowledge the Creator, our Creator, the Creator is in the Declaration of Independence. I acknowledge Dorothy, who is the root soul of my life and journey. We collided here in Nashville in February or March of 1958, and we've continued since with 3 sons and 3 grandchildren as a part of our immediate family. Then my thanks to Chancellor Nick Zeppos, my thanks to the Provost Richard McCarty, and Vice Provost Lucius Outlaw has already been mentioned, but I want to say something else. I tease him as being my handler and manager, but he's far more than that: philosopher, administrator, friend for the ages. And he symbolizes for me the finest values, the finest intellectual effort, artistic effort that this university represents. He represents for me the aspiration of this people, America, and I want to especially give thanks to him for his friendship and camaraderie across these years since 2006. This means more than I can express in words, but I want to try to do this with people. One of my friends is here who was here in 1958 when I arrived, Jean Davenport. Jean, would you stand, please? You represent our group. I don't know if there were others here in 1958. If there are, I invite you to stand. We're entered this new building in 59, but Jane and I became fast friends. Jane from Birmingham Southern. Is that right, Jane? Still, I don't forget that, I guess. Good, but I found a community of support here when I transferred my work into the Divinity School. There are people here perhaps from 1960, I'm not sure. Anyone here in the university in 1960? Yes, please stand. Thank you. I miss the presence of Will Campbell, who was here in 58 when I arrived and introduced me to Dorothy. And I had wished that I could have called Dr. Charles Roos, now retired, a physicist, who had come as a young man to the university to help build the science departments at Vanderbilt, and was one of the key figures in the sort of reconciliation that occurred back then in 1960. I want a long-term family friend to stand, John T. and Jean Fisher and their daughters and granddaughter who's here, daughter and granddaughter who's here from Memphis. They are a part of our stream of community across the years. John T. and I began to talk during the height of the sanitation strike in Memphis, Tennessee, and we've stayed connected in so many different ways ever since. Are there others here from the 60s itself in Nashville? Yes. Yes, Mr. Ote, yes, good. All right. Because what I want to try to say is that this portrait, for me, represents all the folk who were supportive of the new University Vanderbilt in 58 and 59 and 60 when I arrived here. Vanderbilt had started the journey of looking at itself differently, especially intellectually and in terms of becoming a magnificent research university. But so much of that was on the QT and quiet, and I did not learn until later that much of that wanted person like me to arrive as a divinity school student and to stay hidden and concealed for the most part. I didn't know that I was not supposed to go to Rand Hall to eat lunch. Gene Davenport and I didn't know it either. Gene didn't know it either because he's one of those colleagues that we would go to Rand Hall and eat our lunch oftentimes. And it was clear that Vanderbilt was already thinking about what it had to become, at least from the point of view of the student body and others who were there. So I'd like this to reflect the folk from that past and the work that they did and the support they gave. In many ways, I believe they knew that a new time was dawning in 58 and 60, and they were ready for it and were a part of it. Then the second thing I want to lift up is that I see this portrait also to be a symbol of the movement for change that we've been talking about this year as never before, and for the nonviolent direct action which people like Martin King and Septima Clark represent, for the unnamed and unheralded millions of people, the massive diversity that began to cause this nation to look at a different kind of agenda in spite of what has been resistance and all, and that agenda emerging again and again. I see this portrait as a symbol, as the Chancellor has already said, of the university yet to be, inculcating and nurturing women and men of character, courage, compassion, and common sense for our times. We desperately need that in our country, and we look to the fact that November the 4th and November the 13th are no accidents, but that can be for us a reminding of ourselves of the unheralded task that is still ours. I express my thanks to all of you who have come this evening, and simply tell you that I hope that this signifies not only a time for change, but a time for change for me and my recommitment to continue to go on for as long as I have life and breath. I believe very firmly in the values that the movement of nonviolence in this country helped to launch: compassion and truth and beauty and wonder, and the fact that we human beings don't take enough care of ourselves, but that we can be a better people, we can be a better Vanderbilt, a better Nashville, a better Los Angeles, a better nation, a better world, if we want to make it happen. And surely each of us here is a part of that. We can move from the despairs of these days to the hopes, from our fears to courage and confidence. We can move from the old cruelties and tortures of life to creating what many of us called in those days the beloved community. Finally, let me say simply that to put those sorts of things at the top of our list of how we work and struggle is what I commit myself again to do. I'm very mindful of one of the fine poets of the world, Nazim Hikmet, a Turkish poet of the 20th century who was more in jail than he was out of jail, but was an artist and a man who spent his entire life on behalf of justice and wonder and democratic Turkey and Turkey of liberty. And he wrote from jail a note and a letter. He called it a letter to his son, and in it he has these words which I think exemplify what I feel that we are about. He writes, "You can never have enough of the world, Mehmet. Never enough. Don't live in the world as if you were renting, or act as though you are only here for the summer. Live and act as though this is your Father's house. Believe in seeds and earth and the sea, but people above all. Love clouds and machines and books, but people above all. Grieve for the withering branch, the dying star, and the hurt animal, but feel for people above all. Rejoice in all the earth's blessings, darkness and light, the four seasons, but people above all. I say that the struggle in the United States and in the university are essentially the same, and that struggle will be lighter, less of a burden, more of a joy, less of risk and more of a sense of a new time, a dawning, if above all, people matter to us. Again, my thanks to the university and to all of you who have come this evening.